Man, I am so relieved right now. So I had a bit of a scare. I was on my second set on the bench press and, 120 kilos for sets of 5. I've been doing that last week or so. And I couldn't believe, when I unracked it, I couldn't believe how heavy it was. So I re-racked it after the second rep, and I thought to myself, has my system completely taken a dump? Have I just gone to absolute crap? What is going on? How can I be this damn fatigued? Even my bench press is suffering now. So in my disbelief, I get up and I walk over to see the damn plates. Have I done something weird with the plates? And I noticed that there's a 2.5 kilo on the left-hand side and there isn't one on the right-hand side. So I automatically thought of my daughter. My daughter was kind of in this session in and out, inside the house and outside with me, blah, blah, blah. I was so relieved when I saw that 2.5 kilo on the side. I just, in that moment when I re-racked the weight, I thought to myself, oh my Lord, what is going on with me, man? I can't even do bench press anymore. I can't hit 190. Everything's feeling really heavy. Have I really taken a dump in terms of fatigue? Have I really overshot myself? Have I really overreached that far? I can't even do the bench press, man. When I saw that plate, I was like, oh, thank God for that. Thank God for that. In the last day or so, after yesterday's video, I kept thinking about recovery and thinking about all these different ideas. You guys have come up with some really good ideas. A few guys have said, you're jumping way too heavy. 10 kilo jumps is way too heavy. One of you guys said, why don't you go, 182.5. Some of you guys have said, why don't you go 185? Why jump in fives? One of you guys actually said, why don't you hit one set of 190 and then do the other 4 sets with 180? So all these different things that kind of circulate in my mind. I'm thinking about recovery, thinking about all these programming things. And last night, a video pops up on my feed about video games. Sometimes I like to watch video game reviews, IGN, all that sort of stuff. I don't play video games anymore, not the latest stuff. I play stuff that's 15 years ago and I mess around with it, here and there. And so I think that's what led to this video popping up on my feed, and clicked and started watching. It was some guy reviewing this channel on the internet that was really massive. We're talking 10 million views. He was in these first, I think it was Fortnite, I think he was on. Anyway, he got to the point where they were discussing performance enhancing drugs because this fella basically in the space of a year looked like he aged 25 years. From my experience, seeing him pre and post in the space of a year, I just automatically thought meth. He was pale, he was sunken, he was underweight, he had pimples, he was picking at his skin, he was fidgety. The video creator of this particular video, he was talking about that, and he didn't really name any of the drugs, but automatically I thought about meth. And so then there was another interview that he showed in this video where this, I don't know what other gamer he was playing video games. I think it was, I forget now, Dota, I think it was, that massive game that people play. And this guy basically, he was getting interviewed with the rest of his teammates, and he said, yeah, we're all on drugs. He mentioned Adderall, and he's basically this, it's prolific. The use of drugs on this level is prolific. You just basically cannot keep up the pace. You can't have that concentration for such a long period of time without performance enhancing. And so here I'm thinking about my recovery, thinking about what I'm going to do, blah, 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 blah. And then I already know that there's performance enhancing drugs in this sport, this bodybuilding, this powerlifting, this sporting kind of field. And then I recently kind of learned about, drugs in the academic world, people taking drugs to pass exams. And now I've learned, I never crossed my mind, but now I learned that even these gamers are using PEDs. Man, it just blew my mind. And I just thought it was an interesting video in that moment of my frame of mind that I was thinking about recovering for the 190s, sets of 5s. And in that moment when my daughter misloaded, or she loaded the extra plate on the bench, in that moment I was like, man, how can I be so under recovering? Especially in my mind, thinking about all these PEDs and all this sort of stuff, I'm thinking to myself, man, these guys, if the human body naturally is struggling with what I'm doing right now, goodness me, imagine if you could come in and hit 5x5 every day, man. Who knows what people do and all sorts of stuff. You just up the dose, right? But I was so relieved when I saw that I'm kind of not that bad. Like I still managed to hit 5x5 on the bench press. I was relieved, but it was just an interesting kind of set of, thoughts in that moment when I was thinking that I'm so freaking just drained. And in fact, it was just a misloaded barbell. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, the whole PED story, the whole sphere of recovery. The Russians call it restoratives for that reason, because it gets you back in the game. In the academic world and in the gaming world, they're using stimulants to keep themselves awake and keep themselves sharp mentally. It seems like wherever I turn, I see people are using some sort of substances, and here I am, trying my hardest to kind of work out a program, not only that I can get stronger with and get better at squatting, but also fit it into my schedule of work, shift work. I've got a night shift tonight and tomorrow night and all this sort of stuff. And so rolling all of that up into my, sort of mentality, my mind, I'm just thinking about all these things. And it's like, not only can you not compete naturally, in bodybuilding and in this sort of sporting world, but you can't even compete in like academia almost, it seems. Definitely in the gaming world. I know, back in the day, I used to watch videos. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this video game. Like when I was like 19, 20 years old, I used to watch videos on StarCraft. My brother started playing StarCraft back in the day. StarCraft 2, I think it was. Anyway, at the time the game was really popular, and I started watching these guys, and around that time I learned that the peak kind of performance for these type of games is guys around like 18, 19 years old, I think, from memory, because your neural firing, your neural processing is at its quickest. You can respond the quickest. Your reaction rates are the best around this period. And so now I'm kind of thinking about PEDs and what it's doing to that kind of peak, prime age for gamers. It's just interesting to kind of roll it up, because performance enhancing is not just physical performance. It could be anything performance. Anyway, I'm glad where I am. I'm glad that I'm going to work out exactly what I need to do in terms of recovery and whatnot. And that's kind of the secret to all of this. We talk about 5x5 3 days a week. We talk about frequency of training twice a week, 3 times a week, 5 times a week. There's a lot of variables to consider here. Ultimately, you have to look at your own life. You look at your own circumstances. You're natural. You've got a full-time job. You've got a couple of kids. You've got a wife. You've got this. You've got that. You got to pull all of that into the recipe, into the dish, and work out what's best for you. I've worked out quite early on. I've been nursing for 12 years now, my 13th year now. I've kind of worked out really quickly that, big volume sessions are not for me. I just can't recover, especially if they're kind of before my working shifts or something like this. I just cannot recover. And so I kind of opted out for the whole frequency thing, chipping at it every single day. So it's kind of like, smaller deflections on the graph rather than big waves. Big waves are kind of like, they take too much out of you, man. And especially when you have frequency of shifts as I do, I wanted to kind of, superimpose my shifts with my training. So like heaps of small deflections in an upward kind of swing on a graph is much kind of more preferred to me than big waves, big inconsistent kind of infrequent waves. But everyone's different. There's a lot of personality traits involved in this, and all sorts of things. We're all kind of different, and this is why, like, when you're looking at training programs from people on the internet, you don't really know what they're doing, right? Like if they're on PEDs, that frequency, that volume is drastically different, completely different. On top of all of that, you're also talking about your training history, how far you are advanced in your game. What weights are you lifting? How big are you? If you're a smaller female lifter, you can probably take a lot more volume than if you're a bigger guy. If you're 150 kilos and you're moving 250 kilos for sets of 5, that's a lot of wear and tear. So you probably need less volume, and depending on the frequency and depending on what sort of life you lead. But there's a lot involved. And so, in the last 24 hours, I'm kind of thinking about these types of things. I'm thinking about what I should do. A lot of talk about whether I should go down in frequency, go down in volume. Something's got to go down because I'm kind of hitting the rev limiter here. I'm really kind of revving the hell out of this engine of mine that we kind of call recovery. So something has to give. Right now, 190 is way too heavy for 3 times a week. I can hit 190 if I do it twice a week, I think, for 3 sets of 5. But that's too much volume, too hard, too infrequent. I'd rather go back to 180 hit it for 5x5 3 days a week. I think ultimately that's what makes me feel really healthy. That's what makes me feel happy. And it's not, so mentally fatiguing, so draining to come into a session and think like I'm going to war. I don't want to go to war every single day, man. I want to come in and have fun. Fun is a big component of all of this. If you're coming into these sessions and dreading them and anxious about them, you're doing something wrong, man. Like, whether it's the volume or intensity, you name it, everyone's different. For me, big intensity, fighting every rep is not something that I want to do. I think you can get results. You can still provide the stimulus that you need through kind of easier ways. And I think for me, I'd rather kind of bump up that volume and kind of lower the intensity a little bit. That's kind of the tweaks I want to make. That's kind of the tweaks that kind of make me feel happier. Because the last thing you want to do is start dreading training, start not having fun. And that's completely, like I said, it's completely dependent on everyone. If you're on PEDs, this picture might look completely different to you, right? Let's say you're playing video games. I remember back in the day when I used to play StarCraft with my brother. One of these games we played 2v2. And I was not the player, my brother was. My brother was way better. So we're playing online against two other fellas or whatever. And the whole game would maybe last like an hour. And after an hour, man, I don't know, man. I was 20 years old, something like that, 22 years old around that time. I think I'm drained. I'm concentrating so hard. These three other players are so much better than me. My brother's better than me, and the opponents are better than me. And I'm focusing real hard. My clicks per minute on the mouse or actions per minute, whatever the metric was, it was so low. And I'm like, I'm wasted at the end. And so I'm thinking to myself right now, man, I understand why you people use PEDs. Of course, you're going to have better results if you can put in 4 or 5 hours of that type of gaming a day. Of course, you're going to get better. However, the longevity, you as a human being, is going to be shortened drastically. I mean, this guy that I saw online, man, I forget what the guy's name was. It doesn't really matter. It was a guy, a big gamer. Literally, man, he aged 20 years. His skin was appalling. He had scabs. He had pimples. He was sunken. He was pale. And he was short-tempered. And basically the whole video was about his downfall. And so ultimately, that's what we're dealing with. Yeah, you can use PEDs. I always said that I'm against PEDs for the general population. But if you say I'm using PEDs and you're open about it, I'm happy with that. As long as everyone kind of is aware of what's going on. I just hate fake natties, making everyone feel like shit because, we can't explain why we're so crap and you're so good. But if you're using PEDs, man, of course, it's a completely different ballgame. You're making a different dish, man. It's a completely different thing. So I think that's the whole thing, man. You're always tinkering, you're always putting out fires, you're always thinking about all these different sliders. If you're thinking about a video game type thing, analogy, you're always sliding it back and forth. And as stress, as sleep, as food, as social life, as all of these sliders keep changing day to day, as it is norm, you have to adapt to it. You have to auto-regulate. You can't be a numbskull and act like a machine. You can't put machinery on top of biology. It's very, very difficult to do that. If you do that, you're going to get subpar results and you're going to feel miserable. You're going to feel broken, you're going to get injured and blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of where my mind is right now. The benching 5x5 at 120 is working really well every other day. I'm managing to do that. That can stay as it is. The problem is for me right now is working out this squatting frequency volume. I've got a night shift tomorrow, so I don't even know what that's going to look like tomorrow. So maybe tomorrow I'll come in and mess around somehow, do something. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do, but I have to think about it a little bit more. Not only am I unsure about what volume to do, maybe I'll do 180 for 3 sets of 5 just to kind of further, drain away that fatigue. But then on top of that, I've got a night shift. And so depending on how the night goes, if we have a shocker, tonight, and it's really busy, we're packed out and run off my feet or whatever, it's really stressful. And then it's going to impact my sleep, my food, whatever. And so I wake up tomorrow, you know what I mean? There's so many different variables. And so you as a lifter, I just highly encourage you to be honest with yourself. Warm up, always warm up. Don't make the call from the couch because the couch always lies to you. There's a mental fog and whatnot. Come in, warm up, put the bar on your back, go through up to 50% of your 1 rep max, do whatever you need to do, get the kind of blood pumping, maybe a first sweat, and then you're going to make a call on what you're doing. And this is where I kind of always think to myself, how the hell do people plan 3 months of training in advance? Unless you're a proper freaking athlete, full-time 9-to-5er with all these different sliders that we have, for them it's a constant, it's kind of controlled. Unless you have that type of environment, I don't know how the hell you go about planning 3 months worth of training. I honestly don't. 12-week blocks, to me, in my life, in what I do, I have no idea how you plan that out. I get you might have a vague idea which direction you want to do, which kind of rules you want to do. Like, let's say you hit 7 sets of 5 at a certain percentage, you go up 2.5 kilos. I get that. I get these type of rules. But these linear periodizations based on time, I don't understand that. I'd rather base my periodization, base my programming on performance. Okay, what can I do? Can I comfortably get 7 sets of 5 at 180? If I can do that, I can go next step. My mistake was that I took too much of a chunk. I went 10 kilos more. So I went from like 85 to 90%, or whatever the case is. That's a big jump, man. That's a freaking big jump. What Smart Ivan should have done is go to 185. But in my mind, I was like, dude, I just got 7 damn sets of 5. You're strong enough for 190. But what I failed to realize is that those 7 sets of 5 actually have a recovery curve for themselves. And so you could basically say that 7 sets of 5 is exactly like 193 sets of 5. It's just the same type of recovery requirements. So anyway, all of this stuff is all about recovery. It's all about understanding what you're dealing with. And for a lot of us guys, we are normal people, natural, not using PEDs, normal lives, normal jobs, normal everything. And so we need to be mindful of what we're dealing with. Our sliders are not dosages of PEDs or types of PEDs. Our sliders are like sleep, food, how happy is the wife, how happy is the children, what's happening in the life, are we renovating, are we not renovating, what am I doing, is the garden, like this. These are our sliders, man. Like a professional athlete slider is maybe this PED, this PED, this PED, this competition, this coach, this many reps, this what, like a completely different set of sliders. That's how I look at this, and that's how my mind works. Not only in my mind am I thinking about types of exercises that I want to do to keep my hips healthy, I'm thinking about volume, and then I'm thinking about, on top of all of that, like beautiful ideas that I have about training, I put life on top of that. And life impacts those sliders drastically. And that's fine. That's what we do. And so when you see a guy squatting 200 kilos as an everyday Joe, maybe that's as impressive as somebody squatting, 250 who's a professional. That's kind of how you have to think about it. It's kind of different sets of expectations, circumstances. And when you realize that, you kind of feel good about yourself. You really do, because you can't conquer Rome with 3 blokes. Like if you've got 3 blokes in your army, you're not doing anything, man, right? If you've got, the Mongols, if you're a Mongol invasion, of course you're expected to do all sorts of different things. Anyway, we talk about all these things forever. Once again, appreciate everyone on the Patreon list. I appreciate everyone in the comments. Last night was really, really productive for me. All of your ideas was really cool to see. Some of these things I didn't even think for myself until you guys kind of commented about them. So really appreciate that, guys. Anyway, let me get ready and go to work. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.